Okay. So on your syllabus, it says that we're going to be doing 6B, 5, 6, and 7, but we're not going to be doing that today. We're going to be doing, I'm going to give you a review of chapter 6, and then we're going to go on to chapter 7, 8. So I'm going to be doing a review. Did Sean leave? Okay. We're doing a review of chapter 6 real quick. All right, in chapter 6, when I looked through chapter 6, starting at 6A, I look around, I keep on turning pages, and the first thing that I run across will be, we're talking about the ending isimo. Y'all remember that? Isimo, what does isimo stand for? What does it signify? Isimo. Isimo. What does that signify? Well, it's something to be grande and something to be grandissimo.
Like it's an emphasis, like bigger.
Yes, it's like a big superlative. It's like the most of all, the best of all, everything. So in the reason, your book, it says that muy plus an adjective can be expressed in another way by adding the correct form of isimo to the adjective. So I can say muy grande, or I can say grandissimo, and it means the same thing. So that's the first thing I see in your chapter 6. But it also shows you that grandissimo, this changes in gender and number, depending on whether it's masculine, feminine, or plural. So if the object happened to be something feminine, let's say la puerta is the door. Let's say the biggest door. La puerta, this is like grandissima because of the agreeing in the number and gender. If it's more than one puerta, it was las puertas son grandísimas. Grandísimas. So that changes. Okay. And it reads also, and it makes you read that, and it's on page 255 in your textbook, that the adjectives that end in CO or CA have a spelling change to QU. So the O and or A is dropped. For example, ricos. Let's say something is ricos. Let's say the food is rich. Ricos. Okay. Okay, in your book, it gives you unos pasteles. Unos pasteles ricos. Muy ricos.
What page are you on again?
I am on page 255. There's Alexander there. I'm on page 255. And if I say unos pasteles muy ricos, what am I saying here? I'm saying some very rich desserts. Some very rich desserts, right? I can change that and go with unos pasteles. Riquísimos. So this is this R here. That's an R. Riquísimos. So the CO, that's normally rico, change to Q, U. So if you have a CO or CA word, it's going to end in, it's going to change to QU in Spanish. All right. So that was the first thing I saw in your chapter as I was walking through here. I also noticed that in your nota on page 254, it states that when one item is missing, and this is talking about using the text of me falta. Me falta, it's very, very, very normal, very ordinary to use. But they were talking about, this is translated, this is used just like the verb gustar, like say me gusta, me gustan. This is used in the same manner. And it's talking about and this means it's lacking to me, or I'm missing something. I need, it's something you need, you don't have, it's lacking. So let's say I need some grapes for this fruit salad. So I'm lacking some grapes. So let's say one grape. One grape. Me falta una uva. It is likely to be one grape. And it's only falta because it's one item. Same thing like gusta. But if I'm lacking more than one item, let's say I'm lacking grapes for this fruit salad. Now I'm talking unas uvas. More than one grape. This becomes me faltan. Me faltan. Now it's more, it's plural. So me falta and me faltan. The same thing like me gusta and me gustan. There are a whole class of verbs that are conjugated like that are used in that manner. And this is one of them. I need anything. If something's lacking that you need, this is how you use it. Me falta. You got a team, you got a football team, and the new rules said you have to have 2 girls. And I said you got all boys so far. So you said I need 2 girls. I'm lacking 2 girls. Me faltan 2 chicas. Okay, so that's also in your note out on page 254. And as I continue to go on in your book in chapter 6, wait a minute, you know what? why y'all ain't stop me? Why y'all ain't stop me? Why am I in chapter 5? Okay, so we're reviewing chapter 6. Alexander, welcome back. We're reviewing chapter 6. I said chapter 6 and I turned back to chapter 5 and they ain't said nothing. They ain't said nothing. All right, so in chapter 6, as I turn these pages, the first thing I run across would be on page 277, where it talks about the uses of estar in recuerdas. It's in the recuerdas section. It says use estar to tell the location of items, and use ser to tell what items are like. And we need some exercises on that. So when I talk about location, where something is, I always use estar. What? La luz, the light. La luz está en la lámpara. It's in the light. But I use estar to say is because it's location. But to say what items are like, la luz es blanca. Color. It's light. It's white. It's white. So it's telling me something is like. Then I come on turning pages in the right chapter now. And on page 278, I see when they start talking about comparisons. And so I'm getting in the mode now of learning that we deal with items on 3 adverbs and adjectives on a 3-pronged thing. We have your regular adverb, your base adverb, you have your comparison, your comparative, and you have your superlative. Good, better, best. Those are irregular ones, but that's how you do that. And that's what they're talking about here. They teach you how to do that in Spanish. They teach you that about the más que, to compare 2 things. If you're comparing 2 things, it's comparative. If you're comparing 2 things, it's comparative. Compare. So if something can be more than, something can be less than. It reads in an example, it says, el disco compacto de los toros es menos popular que el disco compacto de los lobos. So the Toro CD is less popular than the Lobo CD. So comparing 2 things. All right. And this is on page 278. They went on to show you about the irregular comparative forms. Because you don't always want to use más que or menos que. You can also use, you can look at the comparison here. Look at in the comparison, it says bueno. Bueno and buena. That's an adjective. But bien is an adverb. Mejor que, better than. Peor que, worse than. Mayor que, older than. Menor que, younger than. So either you're joven, you're young, that describes a person. But when I'm comparing, I'm not just describing a person anymore, it's becoming an adjective. You're modifying this verb now. And you could be menor que or mayor que. So Señor Luis es mayor que Señorita Free. All right, but that's the comparison. And that also agrees in number or gender. The mejor and the mayor and the menor and the peor becomes mejores, peores, mayores, and menores. We don't have to worry about gender here because they don't end in A or O. So it doesn't matter about the gender. It's going to be the same word, but singular, plural, we have to watch out for. It has to agree. As I continue on in this chapter, I look on page 284, And on page 284, I'm looking at some stem changing verbs. They give me two. They give me poder and they give me dormir. Well, I know that poder means to be able to, and I know that dormir means to sleep in Spanish. Stem changing verbs. When I conjugate the verb and the stem changes, the stem is what's left on the verb after you take your ER, AR, and IR off. That's your stem. And these are called stem changing verbs. That means somewhere in that little letters that are left over, that changes. The spelling changes. So what I see here in the conjugation of poder is that it turns to puedo in the first person, second person, third person, and first person plural. Excuse me, third person plural. That O changes to you. U-E, I'm sorry. So it turns to be puedo, puedes, puede. And then in the first person plural, it goes back to podemos, and then pueden. Stem changing verbs. The next one was dormir. If your stem would be D-O-R-M, that's your stem. Well, it's a stem changing verb. So I mean, that changed spelling somewhere. There's another O to U-E. So instead of yo duermo, it says yo duermo. Instead of tú duermes, excuse me, instead of tú duermes, it's tú duermes. It changes spelling. And it changes spelling in all persons except that first person plural again. Nosotros dormimos. It's not nosotros duermimos, it's dormimos. Okay, so I think so those two are both stem changing verbs, O to UE. And in your reading, it also gives you an example of jugar, which is said to be translated just as such. So if that's the same way, if it's well, it's not quite the same thing. What I know about jugar is when I translate it, when I conjugate it, it looks just like those verbs. It's juego, juegas, juega. It's UE. But those two verbs didn't have an O in it. It was a U to UE. And it looks just the same. And then in nosotros jugamos. So I'll go back to the U again. So these are kind of like the same thing. We hear the same stuff over and over again. And you guys, we've seen these verbs already, so we kind of like know this already. But they're pointing out exactly what's happening. You know, letting your mind know, okay, these are called stem changing verbs, and this is what happens when you have a stem changing verb, O to UE. We did go over the letters R, the R and the double R, which is on page 285. The letter R, we know that it tells you how to or when to trill your R. You know, we got a R and we have a R. And we need to know when to do what. I normally tell people that the only time you're going to trill your R is if it's two R's. So that'd be ferrocarril. But every other R to me would be Roberto, garaje. It'd be one top of your tongue. And I teach that way because you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with your pronunciation. But I know in this book, it also lets you know that when the R, look at the last part of that, it says when the R is the first letter of a word or comes after L or N, it is pronounced like a double R. For example, if a person's name was Robert, then in Spanish, his name would be Roberto. I have no problem rolling that R because it's the first R. It's the first letter in the word. Roberto. And you got Rita, Ricardo. It's okay to trill your R if it's the first letter. All right. Also, in chapter 6, as I moved on, we read the Querida Magdalena and talked about the two sisters in the room. They weren't getting along because one was messy and one wasn't, and so forth. Chapter 6b, we did go over the dialogue and we did vocabulary on more room objects. In fact, in chapter 6a, I think I woke up in the bed when you guys saw me in the bed waking up talking about Spanish objects in your room, your vocabulary. But the main things in chapter 6 and 6b were the two verb forms. They start talking about your command form, your affirmative two commands. How to make a command in the informal form, in the tú form only. So we already know there are more ways to say you. It could be usted, it could be ustedes, but we're not talking about either one of those. We're talking about tú only. So someone who I'm familiar with, someone who I know, who I rub elbows with, I can give them commands in this form. When I give this command, all I have to do is say the third person singular of the verb. If the verb is hablar, then the third person singular is él, ella, usted habla. With that same form, habla, it's also the tú command. So it becomes habla. I don't have to say tú at all. In fact, you don't say tú. You just say habla. Speak. And the person can understand you talking to me and you're using the tú form, because if the context will always give you right. So I know that if it's an AR, ER, or IR verb, it does not matter that the third person singular form will give you your command for tú. Affirmative. Because I did tell you that you have negative commands. I can say speak, I can say don't speak. And I cannot say no habla. Habla means speak, but no habla does not mean don't speak. That has to mean he, she speaks, doesn't speak. Why? Because when I do the negative command forms, it's a whole different tense. It's a whole different thing. And we haven't gotten there yet. And it's called a subjunctive. Now, we also went over the irregular verbs in the command form. So we learned that, the book only gave you like 2 of them, but I gave you a page where it had like 8 more on there. And poner, the command form poner is just pon. It's not the third person singular. It's irregular. Decir is di. Tener is ten. Salir is sal. And I can't think of the other ones we had, but we had a few of them. Oh, okay. And so we kept on going on in chapter 6b, and we ran across another verb tense, and which is called your present progressive tense. Your present progressive tense is using your ing form of the verb, and it means that the action is happening right now. So I am walking, or I am sleeping, I am talking to someone on the phone, I am teaching class. All those forms are present progressive. Well, how do you do that in Spanish? We learned that if it's an AR verb, your verb is in an ANDO. And if it's an ER verb or IR verb, it should end in IENDO. For example, if the verb is hablar, and for speaking, it's hablando. If the verb is escribir, which means to write, the word for writing would be escribiendo. But I also know that it can't go by itself. I mean, we don't just speak saying speaking. Who's speaking? We don't know. So we make a sentence. And we know that the first verb, which is your helping verb here, your auxiliary verb here, this is when you have to use estar. So your whole present progressive tense comprises of estar plus ando or endo on the end of your infinitive. Example, I am speaking. Yo estoy hablando. Estoy being the first person of estar. I am speaking. Ando. Él está escribiendo. He is writing. Once again, estar plus the ando yendo form of the verb gives you that present progressive tense. And this is a tense to use when something happening right now. The only irregular form they gave you for the present progressive was from the verb leer, which means to read. Now, we don't say leyendo, and it's not spelled that way. It's spelled with a Y. It's simply Leyendo, leyendo. So the same thing would be creer. Anytime 2 verbs got 2 E's in it, leer and creer, it's creyendo with it changes to Y. Okay, they also talk about pronunciation of the N and the N with the tilde over it. We didn't spend any time on that because that's self-explanatory. We know how to pronounce both of those letters very well. All right, and then you guys went on to do Canta Clara, which is the same, the small version of the Cinderella story in Spanish. And I think that was probably a homework, I'm sure. Yes, it was. And that would actually conclude chapter 6A and chapter 6B after I learned the vocabulary. Let's see how we're doing. So now we embark on a new endeavor. And it starts on page 342. And this will be the vocabulary for chapters 7, 8. Now you guys are finishing class on the middle of next month. And I said we're going to finish chapter 8. And so we're right on schedule. In fact, I really want to. I might start some Spanish 2 stuff with you guys before we finish class over with, because we are truly going to be finish chapter 8 really soon. Well, probably before March even hits. And that's what that verb study did. See, now we went over that present progressive tense. We went over. I think we went over affirmative to command. And so a lot of stuff you don't see already. It's not that foreign to you. That's why I do verb studies. And we're also going to do the preterite tense, which we haven't studied yet. That's starting now to say the past tense. Now on page 342, you have the vocabulary, which is really dealing with going shopping and buying clothing and things of that nature. And I'm going to pronounce the words now, and then we're going to go on break. You can repeat if you can. If you can't, but this will be your only teacher recording, because you guys don't get those anymore. So here I have buscar, comprar, el dependiente, la dependienta, ¿en qué puedo servirle? Entrar, la tienda de ropa, el abrigo, la blusa, las botas, los calcetines, la camisa, la camiseta, la chaqueta, la falda, los jeans, los pantalones cortos, la sudadera, el suéter, el traje de baño, el vestido, los zapatos. ¿Cómo cómo te queda? ¿Me o te queda bien? ¿O me o te queda mal? Llevar, nuevo, quizás, perdón, vamos, ¿cuánto cuesta? Costar, el precio, tanto, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1000. Tener razón. Los dos, las dos. Esta, estos, estas. Ese, esa. Esos, esas. And then the last thing you have is 3 verbs. Pensar, which means to think. Yo pienso, tú piensas, él, ella, usted piensa, nosotros pensamos, ellos, ellas, ustedes piensan. Preferir. Yo prefiero, tú prefieres, él, ella, usted prefiere, nosotros preferimos, and ellos, ellas, ustedes prefieren. And the verb querer, which means to want. Quiero, quieres, quiere, queremos, and quieren. With that, we're going to go on break, and we'll come back following the syllabus. I'll see you guys at 5:40. 5:40. Adiós. A las 5:40.